Hello, this is Matt Cheney with Washington Fine Properties. Welcome to Onsite with Matt Cheney. Today we're in the West End neighborhood of Washington, D.C., so that's the zip code 20037. If you saw my previous episode where we were in Foggy Bottom, we were actually in the same zip code. So just to give you some kind of reference points, K Street here in D.C. kind of cuts this neighborhood or this zip code in half, the southern part being Foggy Bottom and the northern part being the West End. The West End is the neighborhood between Foggy Bottom, DuPont Circle, and Georgetown. And it wasn't really quite a well-known area in the past. Sometimes people called it DuPont or Foggy Bottom, but it is a neighborhood in its own right. Many years ago, it had been full of office buildings and had been in some ways kind of an office park in the city. But things have changed a fair amount. There have been more residential buildings coming to the neighborhood. As you can see, it has more of a city feel than a residential feel. Obviously you can see some office buildings and residential buildings behind me. Just to give you some kind of numbers to feel for the neighborhood, there have been 45 sales in the past 90 days here in the West End. Average sales price was $784 for those homes, and they're on the market for 48 days. That's a little bit high for the DC metropolitan area as far as days in the market. And just to give you a reference point, here in DC, the average asking price or closed price was $527,000 for a condominium with 28 days in the market. And that does make sense that the days on market would be longer here in the West End just because the average sales price is that much higher than the median and the average for the overall area. And it has to do with location. It's a very desirable location just in DC, but also in the metropolitan Washington, DC area. So just across the bridge from us right here, you have access to Georgetown, but you can also access Northern Virginia and Maryland very easily from here. So if you need to go to places such as Bethesda or Potomac or McLean, Arlington, the National Airport, McLean, GW Parkway, they're all very easily accessible from here in the West End. So it basically gives you the great benefit of being in DC and access all into DC, that's all east from here, or all points that are outside the city, suburban Maryland and Northern Virginia. To give you some more examples of how the neighborhood's turning over or changing, right behind me here, this building right here had been an office building for a number of years, and it was converted to residential about 10 or so years ago. Had originally been designed to be a condominium building, but the market shifted a little bit and the developer decided to keep it as residences or rentals, that is. It's probably one of the top 5 rental buildings in the DC area. Rooftop swimming pool with phenomenal views throughout, very modern finishes, and it's built out as a condominium. So theoretically it could convert to condo in the future because it's legally set up as one, though I'm not promising that, just given the landowner is a REIT, and REITs don't generally take their condos or don't convert things to condo. They usually keep things for the long term. Another really cool example is this building right here. This had been an office building on the lower part and residential on the top part. It's built back, I think, in the late 70s, early 80s. A developer bought the bottom part because what's been happening here in DC is a lot of the law firms that were originally here in the West End have been lured to move farther east in this city where they can get brand new shiny office buildings. So they've moved, and these buildings have fallen into what you would call Class B or Class C status, which means there's not as desirable for companies or corporations to set up office here. So the owners have had to convert them to residential, which makes perfect sense because it's right next to Georgetown, which is a great residential neighborhood. It's very similar to what you might have been seeing if you do follow national real estate trends. Up in New York City, Wall Street's seen a fair amount of older office buildings converted to residential, and that's playing out very much so here in the West End. So this building right here, 2501 M Street, they're through most of their sales. I think they sold 70% of their units. The units on the bottom floors are actually much larger units, and they've had 3 sales in the past 3 months. They're averaging just north of 2.2 million, though their days on market is not quite the average. I believe they're averaging about 249 days on the market, but it's new construction, so it's not quite the same as far as absorption as when you look at resales, because resales, it's usually just one house, one owner is selling the house versus bringing 30, 40 condos on the market, and that's not really going to get absorbed right away. Pardon me if I'm using some commercial realtor or broker speak. In my previous career, I worked with a lot of developers, and that's the way they talk. But that being said, there was a lot of condos to put on the market. They didn't get all sold right away. So some of the larger ones are taking a little bit longer to sell. So I think that's kind of the West End in a nutshell. To give you a feel for where I am, I'm in Francis Field. Had been an athletic field, or it is an athletic field that's had a lot of work done to make sure the grass is looking good. It's right next to a dog park. A lot of work's gone into making sure this dog park is friendly for a lot of the neighbors. So Friends of Francis Field have done a lot of work to restore this park, and then the dog park has its own group. I think it's called West End Dogs is the name of that group. So there's a lot of folks who are putting down roots here in the West End and looking to develop it more of as a residential area and looking to stay here for the long term, which is always great for real estate values, that folks love the neighborhood and they're putting their efforts behind it. That all being said, if you have a question about a condo in the West End, let me know. I'd love to be of help. Speaking of which, I've lived in the neighborhood for a number of years, long-time resident, so I know a lot about the neighborhood and a lot of the other buildings. Speaking of which, here's another condo building right here. Office on the bottom part, condo on the top. That's part of what they were developing way back when. I could keep on talking. I will end now. Thank you for joining me today at Onsite with Matt Cheney. I am looking forward to presenting something new and exciting to you in about a month. Take care.